Great. So my name's Emily Ross. I'm the program officer for grants. And I'll turn over to Camilla to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Camilla Sandoval, and I am the program coordinator for grants.
And I'm adding a spotlight for you as well, Camilla, so people can see you. On the screen, you'll see our emails. Like I said, we're super responsive by email. You can also give us a call too, but emails are usually quicker to respond rather than playing telephone tag, but we're happy to communicate any way that works for you. And I'm going to pass it over to Camilla for the first half. We'll just be playing tag back and forth going through the presentation.
All right. Well, hi again, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are very happy to be in our third year of offering our Hatza SHINE Grant opportunity. And for those of you who may be new to our grant making here at Maryland Humanities, this grant program is the result of an overall shift in our grant making practices. A few years back, our grants were program and project funding only. And with this new grant program, we've now opened it to a more far-reaching general operating support funding opportunity. Of course, program and project-related costs are very much under the general operating support umbrella. We've just expanded what this grant can be used for. As in years past with SHINE, all grant awards are $10,000 each. And for this grant cycle, we will be awarding 90 grants. So a total of $900,000 will be going out to 90 different nonprofit organizations who are providing humanities programming in our state. Lastly here, I love to point out that there is no matching requirement required for this grant program. We do not ask that of applicants, of grant recipients. The full award, the full $10,000 is given to grant recipients in one installment. So that's a little background on the program itself. We'll get into more details later. But we also want to share a little bit of background on our organization, on Maryland Humanities. We want to share our mission with you because we use this to guide all our programs here, including our grant program. So for folks who might be wondering how their organization aligns with the Hatza SHINE Grant Program, we like to direct them to our mission, vision, and values. We think this is a great first step to see how your organization might find connections between the work that you do and the goals of us at Maryland Humanities. And so expressing and demonstrating that alignment, that connection through your programming, through your organizational culture, through your goals and impact, demonstrating those connections will be important in your application and can help make your application a stronger candidate. Moving on now to one of the central parts of our grant program, the centrality, the connection to the humanities. This is one of the most common questions we get every year from prospective applicants. And it's a valid question because of how subjective the field of humanities is. So our team has put together a humanities definition that we hope will help folks better understand what we mean when we talk about providing humanities programming as being an eligibility requirement. We've provided this definition in multiple places in our FAQs and our guidelines in the application itself. So don't worry if you can't write all this down right now. But when we talk about humanities programming, we're talking about programs that do one or more of the following: explore and elevate our shared stories of the past, present, and future to connect people, preserve, share, and celebrate cultural identities, heritage, and traditions, promote storytelling and enriching communities through dialogue, discussion, and participation, and/or bring people together to encourage thoughtful and accessible programs that value equity, democracy, collaboration, and lifelong learning. In addition to that, a lot of the common suspects, the subjects that we think of when we think of humanities, I'm just going to list off several, but we include literature, history, art history, philosophy, archaeology, languages, theology, jurisprudence, ethics, architecture, and some social science disciplines. So if you're an organization who's in that gray area where you're not really sure if your programming or if your work is connected to the humanities, we strongly recommend spending some time with this definition. And you might find that you are indeed very connected to the humanities, but just not in the the more common ways that we think of. So that is another helpful thing to keep in mind as you decide to apply and work through your application. Next, I'm going to go through some costs that grant funds can be used for, and then after that, go over some eligibility requirements. First, as I mentioned from the beginning, our grant-making practices shifted to provide general operating support funds. And when we talk about general operating support, we really think about your day-to-day expenses, what keeps your organization running. So this includes employee salaries, rent, utilities, supplies, and of course, those programming and project-related costs. Ultimately, we trust that you know what your organization needs most to keep your doors open. And so for the most part, we keep this list as broad as possible. We do, however, have three main areas where we would discourage the use of these funds, and those would be construction, large-scale renovations, and collections acquisition. But again, for the most part, we hope that these funds are as far-reaching as possible. Now, how do you know if you're eligible to apply for a Hatza SHINE grant? We have four major eligibility requirements, all of which are listed here on this slide. The first one I just talked about, the organization must offer humanities-based programming as a significant part of its work. The organization must be designated as a nonprofit and maintain good standing with the IRS. Related to that, the organization must not only be physically located in Maryland, but registered as a nonprofit in Maryland. And then Maryland residents must be the organization's primary constituents. And lastly, for us to focus this grant money on small and medium-sized organizations, we do have a requirement where your maximum annual budget for 2023 is under $500,000. Unfortunately, that would make the following organizations and institutions ineligible for this program: those whose mission or focus is the performance or creation of art, any federally or state-funded agency, all academic institutions, and public libraries. Again, this is just in line with our effort to prioritize small and medium-sized nonprofits doing humanities work that may not yet have the staff capacity or the resources to be competitive in fundraising.
Thanks, Camilla. I want to provide a little bit more insight on that first bullet point, since it was also a question in the chat about organizations that are ineligible are those whose mission or sole focus, sole mission is in the creation or performance of art. The reason why we make a differentiation between the arts and humanities, even though there's so much overlap, there's so much great work being done, in both of those disciplines, is because the funding opportunities for those in the humanities, the pot of money is a lot smaller than the pot of money available to the arts. So the Hatza SHINE Grant Program is really supposed to carve out that niche in the humanities for those organizations that are really dedicated to doing that humanities work. That said, we do fund, and we have funded before, organizations who do performance art or dance or theater as part of their programming, but they have a significant humanities focus that the arts programming that they do is the vehicle through which they do humanities. And I'll give an example. There's an organization who They provide Afro-Cuban dance lessons and dance education. So there's a cultural preservation, there's a cultural identity, there's a history purpose to the reason why they do these dance and music programs around Afro-Caribbean culture. And they explain that on the application, right? It's a part of preserving that heritage. It's a part of exploring and sharing that heritage. And dance and music is the medium through which it happens. An example where it wouldn't be quite a strong application or quite a strong connection to the humanities is, say you have an organization who do general youth arts programming or artist residencies with teens. And there isn't really maybe a clear cultural identity attached to it, or there isn't a clear history, or you know, they're visual arts students. They're not necessarily doing literature or poetry, or it's, you know, and it's a program of that nature rather than that cultural connection. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of an example there before moving on. Moving on to a timeline, I'd like to lay it out for everybody so you can see and expect what would happen before you submit an application, after you submit an application. So the SHINE application is open right now. It will remain open until September 1st. You can submit all the way up until midnight on September 1st, which is a Sunday. You know, some people like to work on the weekends up to the last minute, so we moved it from a Friday to a Sunday. Before then, if you are interested and want to take advantage of it, we are doing draft reviews this year. I will get into the details of draft reviews in just a moment and what they entail, but the deadline to ask for a draft review is August 14th. After September 1st, after all the applications have been submitted, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a lot going on with Camilla and I and with our team of reviewers. So we start out, Camilla and I, doing a first round of evaluations where we're checking everybody's eligibility, we're checking their budgets, we're checking their 990 forms, and making sure that everything's in order before it goes on to our team of reviewers who do all of the scoring. So it takes Camilla and I about two or 3 weeks to go through all those applications. And then we pass it on to our reviewing team. Our reviewing team has about 6 weeks to independently review applications. They come together and have a final meeting for about 2 hours where we go through applications, we have discussions, we make sure that we are all in agreement about who we're going to award. And we expect that by mid-November, if you apply, you should receive notification whether you'll be receiving an award. Any delays or changes in this timeline that you see will be communicated to all applicants. So if we are delayed by a few weeks and we still haven't given you a decision, we will let you know. That said, you know, it doesn't hurt you to reach out to us if you're really eager. You know, it's not going to be points off or anything. So I like to lay it out here so you know what to expect. And yeah, I think we'll keep going. So with that in mind, the biggest question and most common question we get is, how will applications be evaluated? So like I mentioned, Camilla and I do that first round of evaluation for eligibility, the budgets and taxes. We also do give your organization a score based on per capita funding allocation and a score based on socioeconomic prioritization. Those are calculated by how much money your county has received from Maryland Humanities, just Maryland Humanities grants over the last few years. And then the other is calculated by the population to average income within your county. So every county receives a different point depending on where your organization is. If you want to see where your organization stands, the evaluation rubric is available on our website, mdhumanities.org/grants. And I'll point that out at the end of the presentation today too, just to give you a tutorial of how to find these rubrics. After the first evaluation, if your organization is eligible, it'll move on to the second evaluation to our panel of reviewers. We have about 25 reviewers that represent a diverse group of people from all around the state, a really diverse age group, age range. It's people who work in the humanities, people who work in grants, folks who work in the government sector as well. Really wide-ranging group of folks. We used to have all of our grants reviewed by our board members. This year, we have very pointedly made an effort to bring in the voices of our community members to do a peer review and have a peer review panel. So your application, if you submit one, is guaranteed to be reviewed by at least 2 reviewers from a diverse group of people. And they go through the evaluation rubric and they'll provide comments, they give scores, and on the screen you'll see the different categories under which your application will be scored. So the centrality of the humanities, how connected to the humanities is your mission and programming, your organization's diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, impact strategies and approaches, the impact and significance of your programming, the diversity and equity of representation in programming in your audiences and in your programming, the impact and outreach that you're doing as an organization, the representation in your audiences and the outreach that you're doing to serve underserved populations, and that you demonstrated a clear use of how you would use this funding, and you've made an argument for how this funding would impact your organization. So with that in mind, I like to be totally transparent in who our funding priorities are at Maryland Humanities. And really another way that you can phrase this question is, what makes a strong, competitive grant application? These are the things that we want to see. These are the things that are going to make your application really strong, stand out to reviewers. And it's also what we talk about a lot at that final decisions meeting, right? These are the places that we're going to focus on. These are the conversations that we're going to have. These are the points of comparison we're going to make between organizations. And that is organizations that center diversity, equity, and inclusion within their mission and in their programming, and are able to demonstrate that in their application. Those who serve geographic areas that have been historically underserved by Maryland Humanities, and those that serve audiences that have been traditionally underserved by the humanities. And we include a list there of those types of audiences, but it's certainly not exhaustive. It's just an example list of audiences to consider. And we like to include that list, I think, because something we see over and over again in applications is that we wish we had more. We wish organizations had said more. Oftentimes we're able to read through the lines and see that organizations are working with underserved populations or doing really great equity work, but they didn't quite lay it out or spell it out in their application. And the more detail you can provide, the more you're able to illustrate a story of how you're doing this work, the stronger your application is going to be. There are no text limits. There's no character limits on the application. You can write to your heart's content. And the thinking behind that is that we all trust you as organizations to know what you want to say and how you want to say it, and then whatever length of word is adequate to you. So for that reason, we don't give limits, and we also don't really give guidance on how much you should be writing, other than what I just said. More is better, more detail is better. I'm gonna swing it over to Camilla and answer some of these questions in the chat while you're talking, Camilla.
All right, so part of your application will require you to provide us with your EIN number and a copy of your fiscal year 2023 annual operating budget. This will help us confirm that your organization is in good standing with the IRS and confirm that your organization is under the $500,000 budget limit. You'll see in the application itself, and I believe in the guidelines as well, you'll see that we provide a budget template that folks are welcome to use, but you are not required to use that template. We just make it available to those who may need it. And there is still time to apply. Sorry, Emily, I don't want to interrupt if you're in the middle of a thought typing. Just for the next slide, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. So there's still time to apply. There's about a little over a month left to apply. This year, we opened the application period earlier than in past years so that we could give folks more time to prepare their application and submit it by the deadline. This year, the application will close on September 1st at 11:59 p.m. And that's closed by the grant portal itself. That's not done by us manually, so that will turn off exactly at 11:59 p.m. And then as I just mentioned, our grant portal is where you'll apply. The grant portal is called Foundant. The link for that is available on our grants page, but we can also provide it to you. I can also put it in the chat for you all to access it.
Thanks, Camilla. I want to point out, also new this year, a section on our website, the application support resources and tips section. And this is a quick overview of all of the resources available to you as applicants that I highly suggest and encourage taking advantage of. We try to give all these resources up front before you submit an application to avoid having to chase after you or do follow-up questions afterwards. While I was interviewing reviewers for this process, a reviewer asked me, do you ever follow up with organizations afterwards and ask them for more information in their narrative if you want more information? And I said, in a dream world, I would love to do that. It is just so unfeasible, and we just don't have the time to go after every organization and say, oh, you should have said more here, you should have explained this more, you should have said more there. And it's like, what's the cutoff, right? What's enough information and what do we want more of? So with that said, here are all the resources available to you before you submit your application that you can take advantage of. The first one is draft reviews. This is new this year. What a draft review will cover and will do is you can send your application to me and I can check it for completeness, for eligibility, and for grant compliance. What I cannot do is give you a preliminary scoring. I can't give you feedback on what I think the reviewers will say to you. And I can't do extensive editing or rewriting of your application. But I can tell you, yes, you've got everything you need. You're checking all the boxes. There isn't anything more here that you would need to include. So again, if you want to take advantage of that, send your application over to me by August 14th. And I will get it back to you within a few business days and let you know about those 3 points that draft reviews will cover. Another resource available new this year is our DEI toolkit. So this is another common question we get from organizations that will say, I have no idea how to write about diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. And they feel like they prioritize those things. They don't exclude anybody. They're open to everybody as an organization. And that's what we see a lot in applications. People ask folks to write about what are your approaches to diversity, equity, access, and inclusion? And they'll say, oh, well, we're open to everybody and we welcome everybody with open arms. And that's great, but that's also kind of the bare minimum, right? We want to welcome everybody into our spaces. And that's not necessarily a diversity, equity, access, and inclusion strategy. So with that in mind, we've created a toolkit. It's a set of considerations that you can look at as an organization and ask yourself, are you doing these things? And if you are, fantastic, make sure to write about them in your application. It's only going to strengthen it so much more. There's a few different categories that the toolkit's organized under. And I want to emphasize here, The toolkit is not a checklist. Diversity, equity, access, and inclusion work is never ending. It doesn't stop. It's on a continuum. There isn't a pinnacle goal that an organization can reach where they say, we're done doing this work. And so with that in mind, the toolkit's not a checklist and it's not a list of requirements to receive a grant. It's simply a set of considerations to give organizations a starting point and that vocabulary to help them think about how they can formulate responses in their narrative for this grant. We want to level out the playing field so that everybody has access to the same information by what we mean when we say diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. Knowledge is power. And we want the knowledge out there, and we want you all to feel empowered to be able to write about the really great work that all of your organizations are doing. Another resource available are Q&A sessions and open office hour sessions. So everybody here today, you're already taking advantage of one of those coming today to this informational session. But after today, Camilla and I will hold a couple open office hour events and Q&A session events. These are all virtual. They all take place over Zoom. Open office hours is literally just like it sounds like. It's going to be Camilla and I sitting in a Zoom room for 4 hours on Zoom, doing our work as normal. And, if you're coming in, you're knocking virtually on the door if you have a question and you want to meet with us. The Q&A sessions are a little bit more structured. We're probably going to go through some FAQs, not as detailed as an informational session, a little more casual. So again, if you have your questions, you're welcome to bring them there. You're welcome to always email me or Camilla with questions as well. Another resource available to applications this year, or to applicants this year, is an oral application interview. We're piloting this year. What an oral application interview is if you, for any accessibility reason, need to complete your application off of a computer and by word of mouth instead of through the written word, that's fine, and you should feel empowered to take advantage of that. You would basically be scheduling an interview with me. We would be going over the questions on the application line by line, and you would just speaking your answers out loud instead of writing them down. What we'll do is transcribe everything that's said during that interview, give you a copy of it for your approval, and then we submit it like it's a grant, and it's evaluated just like everybody else's application as if it's a written word application. Again, I want to emphasize this is really for accessibility reasons. If you are somebody who's maybe not so technologically savvy and submitting an application through the computer is a little too daunting, give us a call. If there's another accessibility issue there or whatever it is, just give us a call. We can complete the application by word of mouth instead of by the written word. Another resource available to you all is a set of exemplary sample answers. So it's basically a document that goes question by question on the application and gives you an example of a really high scoring answer. And it'll tell you how the reviewers scored it. They've all been de-identified and anonymized, so you can't tell which organization responded. But this is a great resource if you're stuck on a certain question and you want to see how a really high scoring answer, what it looks like. I'm going to toss it over to you, Camilla.
All right. Here just to go over some FAQs. I believe I saw one of these come up in the chat, so I'll be able to answer that one now. But first, if you have a fiscal sponsor, you are welcome to apply. But we do ask that, we do require then 3 additional pieces of documentation. All 3 must be emailed to Emily by the application deadline. So that's the same deadline by September 1st, 11:59 p.m. And so we'll need copies of the fiscal sponsorship agreement between the sponsor and the sponsored organization. that shows a fiduciary pass-through agreement or arrangement. We'll also need a copy of the 2023 annual budget of the sponsor organization. And then lastly, a copy of the 2023 990 form of the sponsor organization. In addition to that, or the other common question we get, what documentation is used to verify an organization's budget and tax standing? So we'll look at two forms, at two documents for that. We'll look at your budget form and we'll look at your 990 form. Looking at those together, we will confirm that your organization's tax status is in good standing. We'll also confirm that there are no major discrepancies between the budget you submit to us and the 990 form that we pull for you. And then lastly, we'll confirm that the expenses listed do not exceed $500,000. Now, this is the question I believe I saw in the chat, and it's important. It's valuable context for this year as well. Last year, we received 130 eligible applications, and we were only able to award 95. This year, for fiscal year 2025, we still anticipate over 100 applications, but we will be awarding 90 grants this year. Lastly, if you received a SHINE grant for fiscal year 2024, you are eligible to apply again this year for fiscal year 2025, so long as your organization still meets the grant requirement, the eligibility requirements for the grant program. And then I think we just have one more reminder of our summer dates, summer event dates for you all to note down. We have, and Emily touched on these already, we have 2 virtual open office hours, the first on July 31st, the second on August 29th. August will also have 2 virtual Q&A sessions, the first on August 13th, the second on August 27th. And then 2 deadlines to keep in mind, the draft review deadline, which is August 14th, and then of course the application deadline, which is September 1st. And then as Emily mentioned earlier, with that schedule at a glance, our goal is to notify applicants of their decision status by mid-November, but we will notify everyone if there's any delay in that target date. mdhumanities.org/events. You can find all the dates and times, as well as the registration links. I think we have them for the Q&A sessions. That's all there on that page. I think that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Mel.